All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're tackling something
Yeah.
that's super important to all of us.
Absolutely.
We're going to be talking about intimate relationships and how to make those relationships last.
Yes.
So how to build strong connections and then keep those going.
I think this is something that everybody is interested in.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
To some extent.
Yeah, and we've got some really
Yeah.
fascinating material to work with today from
Yeah.
this expert in relationships and how to strengthen them.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to jump into this.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Um,
There's some really interesting advice.
yeah, there is.
I think we're going
be able
to
to.
help some people out there.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So we've got we're going to be talking about
Yes.
kinds of things from how to improve your communication.
Yeah.
How to deal with values when your values clash with your partner's values. We even got some really interesting techniques.
Yes.
Like this thing called couples dialogue.
Couples dialogue.
And how to deal with finances in relationships.
That's a big one.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's just jump right in.
Let's jump in.
One of the things that this expert really emphasizes is this idea of daily check-ins with your partner.
Yeah.
And not like just like, oh, hey, how was your day?
Right.
But like setting aside some actual time.
Like dedicated time.
Yeah, like 15 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And just like,
And talking about.
yeah, talk about some specific things.
Yeah, like how did you feel today? What was one thing that was good about your day? What was one thing that wasn't so good?
Yeah. And why do you think that is so important?
Well, I mean, like, I think it's pretty easy for couples to just sort of drift apart, you know, like, and just start living more like roommates,
Sure.
you know? And so by having these daily check-ins, you're staying connected, you're staying engaged with each other's.
Yeah, you're sharing your life.
You're sharing your lives, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're having these regular check-ins. We're sharing our lives. But of course, sometimes there are going to be disagreements.
Always
Disagreements. One of the things that this expert really emphasizes is making sure that your values are aligned with your partner's values.
Right.
And how do you go about figuring out what those values are?
Well, I mean, like, I think a lot of times, you know, you just sort of assume that, you know, somebody had the same values as you, especially if you're...
Yeah, we don't always talk about that.
Yeah, you don't always talk about it. And I think it's important to actually sit down and, like, define, like, what are your core values? What are the things that are really important to you? And then, you know, how do those align with my partner's values?
Okay. And what happens
if they don't?
Well, then you got to figure out how to navigate that, you know, and that can be tricky, you know, but I think it's important to remember that, like, you're still on the same team, you know, even if you have different values, you're still trying to build a life together. So you got to find a way to respect each other's values.
Absolutely.
And find a way to.
And this expert has some advice on how to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
They talk about this idea of moving away from blaming language. Right. You know, like you always do this or you never do that.
Yeah.
And instead using what they call I statements. So for instance, instead of saying you never listen to me, you would say I feel unheard.
Right. I feel unheard when I don't get a response.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to you.
And why do you think that's so important?
Well, I mean, like, when you say you never listen to me, you're basically attacking the other person by blaming them. Yes. And that's just going to make them defensive.
Sure.
And then they're not going to be open to hearing what you have to say.
Right.
But when you say, I feel unheard, you're focusing on your own experience. You're not blaming them. You're just saying, hey, this is how I feel.
Right.
And that's much more likely to lead to a productive conversation.
It's like owning your own experience and not putting it on.
And not making it their fault.
Yeah.
Right.
And do you think this ties into...
I think it does.
This other thing that the expert talks about, which is self-respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does that...
I think when you respect yourself, you're more likely to communicate your needs and your boundaries clearly. And you're also more likely to recognize when your partner is doing the same.
So you're kind of modeling that.
Exactly.
Behavior.
And I think it creates a dynamic of mutual respect, which is essential for any healthy relationship.
Yeah, it's like you're building this foundation of respect within yourself so that you can extend that to your partner.
Yeah, and I think it also helps you to be more assertive. you know, because if you don't respect yourself,
right,
you're more likely to let people walk all over you.
Yeah, you're not going to set those boundaries. Yeah, okay. So we've been talking about communication, but this expert doesn't just stop there.
No, they go deeper.
They talk about this idea of
emotional intimacy.
Yeah, emotional intimacy. And that could be kind of a fuzzy concept for some people.
It can be.
So what does that mean?
What does it mean to cultivate emotional intimacy in a relationship?
Well, I think it's about creating a space where you feel safe to share your innermost thoughts, your fears, your dreams, your vulnerabilities, without fear of judgment.
It's like really letting somebody see you.
For who you are.
Yeah, and knowing that they're going to accept you for who you are, even the parts that you don't like, you know?
So how do you do that?
Well, I mean, like, I think it starts with being vulnerable yourself, you know, being willing to share your own innermost thoughts and feelings.
And it's got to be a two-way street.
It has to be a two-way street, because if only one person is being vulnerable, then it's not really a balanced relationship.
So what are some roadblocks that couples might face?
I think one of the biggest roadblocks is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being hurt.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of times that comes from past experiences. You know, if you've been hurt in the past, you're going to be afraid to be vulnerable again.
Sure.
But, you know, the thing is that if you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, you're never going to experience true intimacy.
And that brings us to this idea of shared activities. Because this expert says it's not all about just like, you know, heart-to-hearts. And
deep conversations.
Yeah.
So
why are shared activities important?
Yeah, why is that so important?
Well, I mean, like, I think it's because shared activities create shared memories. And shared memories are what bond people together.
So it's not just about, like...
It's not just about talking about your feelings. It's about doing things together. Experiencing life together.
Yeah, and so this expert recommends all kinds of things.
Like what?
Like traveling, trying new restaurants.
Yeah.
Taking walks in nature.
Going to concerts.
Yeah, games.
Like whatever you enjoy doing.
Whatever you enjoy doing together.
Yeah. And that brings us to something that can be a little tricky.
Okay.
Which is technology.
Yeah. So
it is a tricky one.
It is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, it can help us stay connected.
Yeah.
You know, we can...
Especially if you're in a long-distance relationship. Yeah. Or if you have family that lives far away.
Yeah, technology is a lifesaver.
Yeah.
But it can also be a major distraction.
Yeah.
You know, and it can actually prevent us from connecting with the people who are right in front of us.
And this expert has some pretty strong words about how technology can interfere with...
Intimacy.
Yeah, intimacy.
Yeah.
And so, like, what are some things that we can do to manage that?
I mean, like, one thing is to just be more mindful of how much you're using technology.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're out to dinner with your partner, put your phone away. You know, like don't be scrolling through social media while your partner is trying to talk to you.
Like actually be present.
Be present, yeah.
In the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to set some boundaries. You know, like maybe have a rule that you don't use your phones at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have a certain time of night where you put all the electronics away.
Yeah.
Right?
You just focus on each other.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this expert has a lot of really interesting techniques that they talk about. One of them is called couples dialogue.
Couples dialogue, yeah.
And it sounds very...
It sounds very fancy.
Really fancy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So break it down for us.
Okay, so couples dialogue is basically a structured way of communicating that helps couples to really understand and empathize with each other.
Okay.
So it involves 3 main steps. The first step is mirroring. And mirroring is basically just reflecting back to your partner what you heard them say.
Okay.
So you're not adding anything, you're not interpreting, you're just repeating back what they said.
Okay.
In your own words.
Got it.
And the purpose of this is to make sure that you're really understanding what they're saying and that they feel heard.
Okay.
The second step is validation.
Okay.
And validation is about acknowledging and respecting your partner's feelings, even if you don't agree with them.
Right.
So you might say something like, I can see that you're really upset about this. Or I understand why you feel that way.
Okay.
And the third step is empathy.
Okay.
And empathy is about putting yourself in your partner's shoes and trying to see the world from their perspective.
And so this is something that you would do? Like you'd go through these steps?
Well, you can do it in a very structured way.
Yeah.
You know, like you can actually sit down and say, okay, we're going to have a couples dialogue.
Right.
And, you know, I'm going to talk for 5 minutes and you're going to mirror and validate and empathize. Yeah. And then we're going to switch.
Right.
But you can also just use these principles in your everyday communication.
Got it. Yeah. So it's kind of like a
framework.
Yeah, a framework or a tool that you can use.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And this expert also talks about finances.
Yes.
Which can be such a it's huge.
Yeah.
And they say that it's so important to be open about finances with your partner.
Absolutely. Why is that? Well, I mean, like, I think money is one of the biggest sources of stress in relationships. And so if you're not communicating openly about it,
right,
it can really breed resentment and mistrust.
Yeah, like if one person's spending a lot and the other person's not.
Or if one person's saving a lot and the other person's not.
Yeah.
Or if one person's in debt and the other person's not.
Right.
You know, there's just all sorts of potential for conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid those conflicts?
Well, and I mean, like, I think the key is to just talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, like have regular conversations about your finances. What are your goals? What are your concerns?
So like a budget meeting?
Yeah, kind of like a budget meeting.
Right.
But also just like general conversations about how you feel about money.
Right.
You know?
Because we all have different...
Everybody has a different relationship with money.
Yeah. Different ideas about money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're communicating.
Yes.
We're talking about our values.
Yes.
We're sharing activities.
We're being emotionally intimate.
We're managing our technology.
We're
talking about our finances.
But inevitably, they're going to be challenges.
They're going to be challenges
because no relationship is perfect.
Right.
You know?
And this expert has some advice on how to
navigate those challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's their advice?
Well, I mean, like, I think one of the most important things is to learn how to manage your frustration.
Okay.
You know, because when you're frustrated, you're much more likely to say or do something that you'll regret later.
Right.
So, you know, how do you manage your frustration?
Right.
Well, like one thing is to just be aware of your triggers. You know, what are the things that set you off? And once you know what your triggers are, you can start to develop strategies for dealing with them.
Okay.
You know, so maybe if you know that you get really frustrated when your partner doesn't do the dishes,
right,
you can have a conversation with them about it.
Yeah.
You know, and say, hey, I really appreciate it when you do the dishes. It would make me feel so much better.
Yeah.
If you could help out more with that.
And again, we're using those I statements.
Well, statements are so important. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think the other important thing is to try to understand your partner's point of view. You know, because a lot of times...
Especially when we're frustrated.
Especially when you're frustrated.
Yeah.
You're so focused on your own perspective that you don't even stop to think about what your partner might be thinking or feeling.
Right.
And so, you know, one way to do this is to just ask them. Yeah. You know, like say, hey, can you help me understand why you did that? Or can you tell me more about how you're feeling?
And to really listen.
And really listen. Yeah.
To the answer.
Yeah. And try not to interrupt and try not to get defensive.
Yeah.
You know, just really try to hear them.
And sometimes it's hard not to.
It is hard.
Yeah.
But it's so important.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've managed our frustration. We've understood our partner's point of view. And now this expert says... we need to forgive.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Yeah.
Why is forgiveness so important?
Well, I mean, like, I think forgiveness is essential for any relationship because, you know, nobody's perfect. Right. We all make mistakes. And if you're not willing to forgive your partner, then your relationship is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, it's going to be full of resentment.
It's going to be full of resentment. Yeah. Right. And it's going to be very hard to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we forgive?
Well, I mean, like, I think forgiveness is a process, and it's not always easy.
Right.
You know, sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
But I think the first step is to just be willing to let go of the anger and the resentment.
And sometimes that can be the hardest part?
It can be the hardest part, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know you want to hold on to it. Yeah. You want to punish them.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's just going to hurt you. more than it hurts them.
So forgiveness is really a gift.
It is a gift. Yeah.
That you give yourself.
It's a gift you give yourself, and it's a gift you give your relationship.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have covered so much today.
Yeah. A lot of information.
A lot of information.
Yeah.
From communication
to values.
To emotional intimacy.
Shared activities.
Technology, finances.
Forgiveness. Yeah. It's a lot.
And it sounds like...
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
But it's all important.
And it sounds like building a strong relationship is really...
It's a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah.
It's something that you're constantly working on.
Yeah.
And growing
and evolving.
Yeah.
Together.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So this has been, I think, a really valuable conversation.
I think so too. A lot to think about.
Yeah. So I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge.
I like challenges.
I think you will like this one.
Okay.
So I want you to think about one thing.
Yep.
One specific thing that you can do this week to improve your communication with your partner. So it could be anything from, trying those daily check-ins.
Yeah.
Practicing your I statements. Maybe putting your phone away when you're having dinner.
Be present.
Yeah, be present.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, so whatever it is, just pick one thing.
One thing.
And commit to doing it.
And do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
You might be surprised at the results.
I think you will be.
Yeah.
I think you will be.
All right, so until next time, keep diving deeper.
Keep diving deeper.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.